Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this momentous occasion, the convening of Bermuda's legislature. This is a day full of pomp and circumstance, and the regiment is back, so we're excited about that. And of course, this is the day where we will also hear the speech from the throne delivered by Governor Rena and Lalgie. This is her last one that
It
she will be
is.
doing before she departs us, and we'll talk about that as well. We'll also get, of course, to hear the government's legislative agenda for this upcoming legislative session. Now, with me today, I'm Tina Evans, and with me today is my friend Heather Whalen. Hello, Heather.
Hello, Tina. It's wonderful to be here. It's a beautiful day. And as you said, this is one of those momentous occasions on the legislative calendar. So we are excited to be here and so thrilled that the regiment's participating. They bring that pomp and ceremony.
Absolutely, and we've missed them over the past few years. We're broadcasting live on CITV and social media, government social media. I do believe I've seen some of the other members of the media out there as well. So you will have plenty of opportunity to look and later on go back and listen. The government is led by the Premier of Bermuda, the Honorable E. David Burt, JPMP of the Progressive Labor Party, and the opposition is led by Mr. Jerry Richardson of the One Bermuda Alliance. This parliamentary tradition of the convening dates back centuries. Neither the monarch nor the king, now King Charles would be, nor his representative is to set foot in the people's representative assemblies unless by special invitation. And we'll talk about the black rod in a minute. This is why the tradition and that of the throne speech is read by the governor anywhere but not in the House of Assembly.
Not in the people's house.
Not in the people's house. King cannot come up into the people's house. There it is. Hence the request that Her Excellency, the governor, comes to the cabinet grounds to read the throne speech. This morning we will explain certain matters of protocol and we'll help you as we get ready for her arrival, the arrival of Her Excellency, and she will arrive a little later on, 10:30-ish. Yeah.
Yes, and her husband, Mr. John Hawkins, will be coming as well. I'm glad, Tina, that you drew reference to the various social media platforms because we have Bermudians overseas who also listen in. So we welcome everyone to this convening of the Legislature of Bermuda. The legislative body, as you would be aware, consists of the members of the Senate, and we refer to the members of the Senate, or we refer to the Senate as the upper house, and members of the House of Assembly, that body is referred to also as the lower house, and they're scheduled to officially gather for their upcoming legislative year. We will witness again the traditions and the pomp and the ceremony that has been interwoven into the Constitution of our island. And as this ceremony proceeds, we will share with you some of the landmarks, the political landmarks, because Bermuda has evolved politically over the years, and the Constitution that helped to bring about that evolution. And by doing this, and so doing and sharing this information with you, we are hopeful that your understanding of our parliamentary history and traditions and the political development, that those understandings will be enhanced. And as I said, Bermuda has progressed politically to that of a self-governing territory with control over most of our internal affairs. We've arrived at that position primarily as a result of the constitutional order that was established in 1968. And we will share with you several of the significant changes resulting from that document. The constitutional order by which Bermuda is governed sets out the composition. So it says that there shall be His Majesty, a Senate, and a House of Assembly. Members of the Senate and members of the House have gathered in their respective chambers. So, this convening or coming together of those elected and appointed to discuss and deliberate on matters on behalf of the people of Bermuda can be traced back to Bermuda's earliest beginnings.
Yeah, and I'll pick it up there. The Bermuda's legislative body is one of, and everyone should know this, got this in social studies. Bermuda's legislative body is one of the oldest in the Commonwealth outside of Britain. And it dates back to the 1st of August, 1620, when the then governor, Nathaniel Butler, summoned a General Assembly to meet at St. Peter's Church in St. George's. The General Assembly comprised of the Governor Butler, his council, 2 male representatives from each of the 8 tribes, which later became known as, of course, parishes. At that first meeting of the Bermuda's General Assembly, Governor Butler advised the representatives of the following, and I quote, "We do not come for ourselves only, or any man's in particular, but to serve and regard the public. We are therefore rid ourselves from all desires of gain. We are to despise all personal interests, because it's all about the people."
It is. It is all about the
And
people.
that charge, of course, is still fitting and relevant for today. Years later, construction began in 1817 on the Sessions House as the city moved to Hamilton. This construction started shortly after Bermuda's capital was transferred, as I said, from St. George's to Hamilton. The Italian design with the terracotta trim is attributed to the influence of the governor at that time, Lieutenant General Galloway. In 1887, the clock tower was added to commemorate the Jubilee of Queen Victoria's reign. Many other additions have been made to the original structure, and some people may wonder, what this whole world role of Parliament, and it's in that spirit and time-honored practice that our legislature convenes today to embark on the upcoming legislature year.
Yes. And we will talk more about the role of Parliament further on as we go with our commentary. Our listening audience, whether they be local or overseas, we would like to share with you that prior to 1999, the convening ceremony did not take place outdoors. It took place in the Senate chambers. This changed because the government that came into play in 1998, the PLP government decided that it wanted the people, the public, to be able to witness the convening of Parliament. And it has taken place on the cabinet grounds ever since 1999. There was one exception, Tina. You may remember that one year in 2020, we were in the town of St. George's.
Yeah, I think there was another time as well. I can't remember.
Yes,
I remember
there
it
was.
rained. I
Yes,
remember it was
yes.
torrential rain.
We were in the parking lot below the House of Assembly. That was. And as you said, this is the last time our current governor, Her Excellency Rena Lalgie, will be participating. We wish her well and thank her for her service.
Our House of Assembly is actually the lower house of Bermuda's legislature. Members are elected during the general election to this stately body. As well, there are occasions when members of the House of Assembly are also elected during a by-election, as we saw this year. This year, Bermuda has witnessed 2 such by-elections. The first was held on May 22nd in the Smith North constituency, 10, as a result of the seat becoming vacant after the registration of the Honorable Michael Dunkley. That by-election resulted in the OBA candidate, Mr. Robert King, being voted in as a member of Parliament for constituency 10. It's actually been a very interesting legislative year. A couple of other things happened.
Interesting. Yes.
The second by-election was held this year, and it occurred on October 4th as a result of the resignation of then Attorney General Mrs. Kathy Lynn Simmons, and this PLP candidate, Reverend Dr. Emily Gail Dill, was successful in that election in constituency 36, and that's just October.
And that was just October.
Yeah, the
And
House
that was hotly contested because the third party also ran a candidate.
and an independent.
And an independent,
So
yes.
it's been an interesting
It
journey
has, it
this
has,
year in the
yes.
legislature and in politics. The most recent general election occurred in October of 2020 when the Progressive Labor Party, led by the Honorable David Burt, who also has the distinction of being Bermuda's youngest
Premier.
yeah, was returned to power. The Progressive Labor Party won 30 of the 36 seats and is therefore the current
Current
governor.
governor. That was a landslide victory.
Yes. Earlier, we drew reference to Bermuda's political evolution, which is attributable to, in a large part, to the constitutional order introduced in 1968. Which we should also point out that there were very many key figures who, without fear, challenged the status quo. For example, there was the evolution of the franchise that resulted in persons who questioned and challenged the status quo at the time and sought to make Bermuda a more just and equitable society. 1960s was pivotal, and 1968 was pivotal in terms of the constitution reform
Absolutely.
in London.
Absolutely. And you would know personally.
Yes, I do.
I know.
But it was revolutionary for
Yes.
Bermuda. And if you ever get a chance to go back and read Bermuda's constitution, you should.
You should. And before 1966, when there was that challenge to voting rights, the women who owned property challenged the Constitution as well, because they felt that they should be allowed to vote. Up until then, no women were allowed. The Bermuda Suffragette Society, led by, Gladys Mizik Morrell. She was one of the leading forces of that Bermuda Suffrage Society, and she's one of our national heroes. They fought for women who owned property to have the right to vote. Now, what did they do in their fighting? They sent a petition to the British government. They held mock funerals, saying that justice was passing, or justice was not around. They refused to pay taxes. They said, no representation, we won't pay taxes. And of course, the authorities didn't like that, would seize their property, and the other members of the Bermuda Suffrage Society would then go and purchase that property back.
And I know you can hear in the background the sound of the Royal Bermuda Regiment Band. Around at 10:30, members of the Senate and the House, of course, they're gathering in their respective chambers. The Senate will adjourn at about 10:40, and Senator John Wright, the Vice President of the Senate, will lead the members of the Senate from the Senate chambers down the staircase of the building onto the Cabinet lawn. The Vice President then will remain at the entrance to greet Her Excellency when she arrives. Now, just an important note, because I think everyone will be wondering, where's the Speaker? Both the Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Honorable Dennis Lister, and the President of the Senate, Senator Joan E. Dillis Wright, will unfortunately be absent from the convening ceremony, as they are currently representing Bermuda, the Bermuda branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, at the 67th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference being held in Sydney, Australia.
The regiment look splendid.
Yes, as they march on.
Absolutely. And given the glorious day, the beautiful blue skies. position.
It is, they really do add to the pomp
Pomp
and
and ceremony.
circumstance of the day. It's so good to have them back. Strong contingent of the Royal Bermuda Regiment. And they will go, and there will be an honor guard that will be positioned right in front of the cenotaph. We have the arrival of the judges of the Supreme Court and the magistrates of the Magistrates Court. Judges of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, the Honorable Larry Mussenden, the Honorable Mrs. Sade Subir Williams, the Honorable Mr. Justice Warren Wolf, the Honorable Mr. Justice Alan Richards, the Honorable Mr. Justice Andrew Martin, and the Honorable Mrs. Justice Alex Wheatley as acting judge.
And we have the magistrates of Magistrates Court. The senior magistrate, Her Worship Mrs. Maxanne Anderson, His Worship Mr. Tyrone Chin, His Worship Mr. Craig Attridge, Her Worship Mrs. Maria Sophianis, and Her Worship Mrs. Aura Lee Cassidy.
So we welcome them as the members of the judiciary, Bermuda's judiciary, and led by, of course, Chief Justice, Chief Justice,
Yes.
Larry Mussenden.
Pleased to have them and them leading the judiciary.
Earlier today, I saw coming on in the screen, I saw the director of the Department of Public Prosecution, Cindy Clark.
Yes.
And I also saw Bermuda's newest Solicitor General. First time ever.
Yes, Sharika Dill.
Now you're going to do it. Shakira,
yes. Thank you for correcting me.
Shakira Dill Francois. So the honor guard is going in place, and we will pretty soon have the arrival of Her Excellency.
Yes.
While we're doing.
They look splendid. Now, Tina, we were talking about the challenges to voting rights, and I had indicated that the Bermuda women's suffrage movement challenged. Women finally got the right to vote in 1944, but it was only for property-owning women. So some people were still disenfranchised. And it was then the work of the Committee for Universal Adult Suffrage, led by another national hero, Paulu Camarafego, who pushed for everyone to have the right to vote.
Absolutely. That challenge was launched in 1960 by the Committee for Universal Adult Suffrage. Dr. Paolo Caramafego, also known as Roosevelt Brown. They challenged Bermuda's under democratic voting system, and Bermuda witnessed the political watershed in 1963 when the Parliamentary Election Act allowed every Bermudian 25 years or older to have the right to vote. That was 1963.
Just recent.
Yes, it is. It was a year after I was born. So you're just not even 20 years ago. No, anyway. Further political developments occurred in 1966 when voting age requirement was lowered to 21 years and the property vote was withdrawn. Then, near the end of the 20th century, in the 1990, the voting age requirement was finally lowered to 18.
What it is now, yes. And rightly so. There was a further major political development that occurred with the Constitutional Conference that took place in 1966 that had representatives from the Progressive Labor Party, which had been established in 1963, and representatives from the United Bermuda Party, which was established in 1964, and independents. As a result of that conference, the Constitution was established. And with the establishment of that constitutional order, the Parliament convened on the 14th of June, 1968, under the new order. Some refer to that constitution as the internal self-government form or mechanism because it gave responsibility for domestic matters to the government. All domestic matters such as education, health, transportation, finance, public works, and immigration. And the governor retained responsibility for external affairs, the defense, including the armed forces, internal security, and the police, and the Royal Regiment. Hence, the Royal Regiment's participation and presence in our ceremony today. Now, there were some other changes.
We see the black rod is in place.
Yes.
And in 19, you can,
Oh.
in 1979, it was a result of the Constitutional Conference held at the Warwick Camp. Designations of the Executive Council and the Legislative Council changed to Cabinet and Senate, respectively. The Constitutional Conference that took place in 1979 also brought on other changes. It provided that elected members of Parliament were now referred to MPs as members of Parliament. There was previously known as members of the Colonial Parliament, or MCPs. Another significant change was that members in charge became ministers, the Executive Council became cabinet, thus the continuing evolution of Parliament. It's worthy to note that a change in government did not take place after 1968 until the general election of 1998, when the opposition Progressive Labour Party came into power for the first time as a direct result of the 1998 general elections.
Yes, and one of the constitutional changes, let me pause and say we see the arrival of the permanent secretaries.
Led by
the head of the civil service.
Head of the public service.
Head of the public service.
Sherry Witter.
And of course the cabinet secretary, Mr. Mark Telemack. And as people would know, permanent secretaries are the senior-most civil servants. One of the other changes that were brought about as a result of that 1972 conference was that the government leader from April of 1973 on was referred to as the premier and not government leader. So
we're just coming on 10:40.
So Edward.
The Senate will be adjourning soon, and Senator Wright, the Vice President of the Senate, will come down with the Senate members of the Senate. They will take up their positions on the cabinet lawn. The Vice President will arrive there, and we have right now Her Excellency the Governor and her husband, Mr. Jacob Hawkins, arrive at the cabinet lawn.
And the motorcade is following the landau that the governor is in.
Right. The commanding officer will escort Her Excellency to the center of the guard, where Her Excellency will receive a royal salute. The Royal Bermuda Regiment Band will provide a guard of honor on Front Street. Then will be escorted by the cabinet. She'll then be escorted by the commanding officer to the cabinet, where Her Excellency will be dispatched. Black Rod.
Her Excellency the Governor, Rena Lalgie, has just received the royal salute. The regiment has given the royal salute very smartly. And Her Excellency is now being escorted back to the cabinet building.
We invite everyone to stand for the arrival of Her Excellency, the Governor.
Yes, Her Excellency is walking up the driveway now.
The Governor will dispatch Black Rod Chief Inspector Darren Glasswood, who is outside the entrance of the Cabinet building, to summon the members of the House of Assembly to the Cabinet Lawn Office for the reading of the speech from the throne. She will tell him, "Gentlemen, usher of the Black Rod, I command you to inform the Speaker of the House of Assembly that I request the presence of the Honorable House forthwith." All of that. And with that, and Black Rod is dispatched to take the message to the House.
You may see the commanding officer of the Bermuda Regiment, Major Duncan Simons, and Her Excellency's ADC, Lieutenant Chris Motzi. They just entered the Cabinet building, following Her Excellency as she entered the building.
She will enter the Cabinet building and be hosted by the President of the Chamber, of the Senate, sorry about that. And we were talking about the 79 constitutional changes that took place. And I just want to add this. In July 2003, following the changes to the Constitution, general election took place under a revised format of 36 single seat constituencies. That's one of the marked members of the Senate are coming now.
We see the PRP Senate Leader, Mr. Owen Darrell. We see the new Attorney General, Senator Kim Wilkerson. And the Royal Bermuda Regiment march off in splendid form.
Okay, and as the members of the Senate are being seated, independent Senators Kieran Bell, John Wright, and as we mentioned, the Senate President is abroad with the Speaker of the House,
Speaker of the House, yes.
Attending a parliamentary conference. Senator Owen Darrell, the government leader in the Senate and Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sports. The new Senator Kim Wilkinson, Attorney General, Minister of Legal Affairs and Constitutional Reform. She's come back again.
She is, yes. We also saw the
she was
arrival
a senator one
of
other time.
Senator
Lindsey
Simmons and Ariana Hudson.
And we're just going to take a moment here to just lay some respect for the senator, for the family of the late Senator Leslie Robinson Clark, who it was an untimely, sudden passing. Just last month, she served the people of Bermuda, her family, her home church, and Bethel AME Church with such grace, dignity, and poise.
Absolutely.
A beautiful, genuine, caring lady who greeted everyone with an infectious smile. We remember Senator Leslie Robinson. Clark Robinson, yeah. We also remember acknowledge the opposition senators. Senator Dwayne Robinson, the Shadow Minister for Education, opposition spokesman in the Senate for Transportation, National Security, Youth, Culture, and Sports. Senator Robin Tucker, Opposition Senate Leader and Spokesman in the Senate for the Ministries of Labor, Home Affairs, Health, Social Development, and Seniors, and Senator Douglas DeCuto, Shadow Minister for Economic Development and Spokesman for Tourism, Works, Engineering, and Legal Affairs. Now, I remember back in the day, and I have to say it, I know some people say it's not a fashion show, Tina. Well, I have to say it.
Oh, dear.
This convening was always the highlight. I remember my mother, the late Dame Lois Brown Evans.
Another national, actually,
A national
the
hero.
first national hero.
Absolutely. She would make sure that she was dressed appropriately, went out and got the best suit that she could get, money could afford, the hat.
The gloves?
No, Dame Jennifer was the gloves.
Oh.
Dame Jennifer was
Thank
the
you.
gloves. And later, of course, it became the fascinators and everyone. And I saw some beautiful fascinators today, ladies.
Yes.
Thank you. And she did it because it meant a lot.
Yes, it did.
I represent my country. I represent myself. I fought hard to get here.
That's right.
And I'm going to show up on this one day looking
Looking
sharp.
splendid.
Especially, there were very few women.
I was about to say that.
Very few women in Parliament.
yes.
So you had Quentin Edness, you had
Jim Woolridge,
Jim
Voice
Woolridge
of Summer,
would come in tails
and top hats.
and top hats. Okay? So they made sure that they looked appropriate on this first day in the convening of the legislature.
Absolutely, and they
And they had to
represented
stand
well.
next
They had
to
to-
those men. And I remember Mrs. Ann Cartwright DeCuto as well would make sure she put on her hat as well. And so it was a good tradition, and I thank you, those of you that keep the tradition going.
Speaking of dress and tradition, there was a time when the women who were members of the House of Assembly were not allowed to wear pants. That has changed as well. So, thankfully.
So at this
Everyone
time,
looks
Black
splendid.
Rod is up delivering the message at the door he will knock on the door of the House of Assembly. He will be allowed entrance in by the Sergeant of Arms. He will deliver the message. The members of the House of Assembly will assemble and get in position and make their way down from Sessions House to here.
Did we mention that two members of Parliament, OBA member Mr. Robert King, the new member, and PLP member Anthony Richardson, did we mention that those two members deliver a message to the governor's staff, and then that gets conveyed to the House of Assembly?
Yeah, that happened. It happened so quickly.
It happened so quickly.
At the south entrance of
Yes.
it very quickly, you'll see two members of Parliament speaking with the
Yes.
governor, and that's the message that they deliver and then take it back up to the House.
Yes, yes, and it does. It happens so quickly, and I'm assuming the cameras caught that. And so we now await the arrival of the members of Parliament,
Yeah, should there
led
be?
by our Premier, the Honourable E. David Gibbons. You were saying, Tina? Should
Yeah,
there be-
I went back to the July 2003, following the changes of the Bermuda Constitution. The general election took place under a revised format of 36 single-seat constituencies. And that it was a recommendation of the Constituency Boundaries Commission that the number of constituencies into which Bermuda should be divided to 36. The commission thereafter, the number of elected members of the House of Assembly should be 36, with each constituency returning one member to the House of Assembly. The late Sir Frank Blackman was the chairman of the Boundaries Commission. Other members included Sir Brian Smedley, the late Honorable Eugene Cox, and the late Dame Lois Brown Evans, and the Honorable Pamela Gordon, and Mr. John Barrett.
Yes, that was an important landmark in our political
Yeah.
evolution as well.
And I do believe that came under the leadership of then Premier Dame Jennifer
Oh,
Smith.
excellent,
I do believe so,
excellent.
if I
Okay.
remember correctly.
So, by custom, all proceedings of either house are open to the public. And since 1991, debates in the House of Assembly and the Senate have been broadcast over the radio. The public may sit in the gallery at the House of Assembly if they want to physically be present and which witness their representatives speaking on their behalf. Now, there are some etiquette rules that our listeners may be interested in hearing. And one of them says that it shall be out of order for members of Parliament to use offensive and or insulting language, and that this would be in bad taste and brings the House into disrepute. There is another rule which stipulates that no member shall be referred to by name only. The standard practice is to refer to the member as the honorable member from and name the constituency. And there's another rule that says the reading of newspapers, books, letters, or other documents, except written materials directly connected to the business under debate, is not permitted. And although it's not stated, cell phones are not allowed during the sitting of the House.
Absolutely. No sitting up reading the newspaper
Not
either.
at all.
Not at all. You can refer to it.
You can refer to it.
You can refer to it, but you cannot sit up in the House doing the people's business,
exactly.
watching the cell phone.
No, not
Word.
allowed.
Not allowed. All right, the MPs are on the way back. The MPs are on the way down from the Sessions House, and we will see their arrival pretty soon. So, no constitutional crisis. All is flowing as well.
All is flowing as well, and so the business will take place as soon as Her Excellency has read the throne speech.
Right. And as we said, the throne speech from the throne, sets out the government's legislative
agenda for the year. And I'm sure it will be an interesting year.
Her Excellency, the governor will exit the cabinet building, ascends the stairs, and enters the antechamber. Will get escorted to the throne.
Her Excellency is being escorted now to the throne by the Major Duncan of the Bermuda Regiment. She's followed by her ADC, Lieutenant Chris Mutzi. We have the arrival of Major Arnold Allen. He is Sergeant at Arms. He's followed by the
Clerk to
the Legislature, and then we have the Speaker, the acting Speaker, Mr. Derek Burgess.
Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, acting Speaker of the House of Assembly, the Premier, the Premier of Bermuda, the Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable David Burt, JPMP. Are we there? We're back live. Mr. Jarian Richardson, JPMP, Opposition Leader, Shadow Minister of Labor and the Cabinet Office and Economic Development. Mr. Neville Terrell, the JPMP Government Whip. and government ministers, the Honorable Walter H. Rabban, JPMP, Deputy Premier and Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister for the Cabinet, the Honorable Crystal Caesar, JPMP, the Honorable Wayne Furbett, JPMP, Minister of Transport, the Honorable Kim Wilson, JPMP, Minister of Health, youth parliamentarians, the Lieutenant Colonel, the Honorable David Birch, OBED, JPMP, Minister of Public Works, and we also have the Honorable Diallo V.S. Rabane, JPMP, Minister of Education, the Honorable Tanae Purvitt, JPMP, Minister of Social Development and Seniors, the Honorable Michael Weeks, JPMP, Minister of National Security, and we have the government members of Parliament, the Honorable Levita Foco, JPMP, Mr. Christopher Famous, JPMP, Mr. Anthony Richardson, JPMP, the Honorable Curtis Dickinson, JPMP, the Honorable Lawrence Scott, JPMP, Mrs. Renee D.L. Ming, JPMP, Mr. Kim Swan, I think everyone's here today, JPMP, Mr. Dennis Lister III, JPMP, the Honorable Zane De Silva, JPMP, the Honorable Wayne Keynes, JPMP, and Mrs. Ianthea Simmons Wade, the Mr. Jashay Adams, Mr. Scott Simmons, Mr. Jamal Simmons, and Mr. Jason Wade and Reverend Dr. Emily Gail Dell. With the opposition parliamentarians, Mr. Ben Smith, Deputy Opposition Leader, Mr. R. Scott Pearman, JP, Shadow Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Craig Cannonier, sorry about that, Opposition Whip, Shadow Minister of Works and Engineering and Tourism, Mr. Vance Campbell, Mr. Robert King, Ms. Susan Jackson, all have assembled. We will hear prayers by Bishop Vernon G. Lamb.
The Lord be with you. The Lord have mercy upon us. Having been biblically admonished to pray for those that are in authority and have rule over us, let us pray. Almighty God and Heavenly Father, we beseech Thee to receive our thanks for your merciful kindness toward us through the dutiful governance of our government. Those who have served at your behest, we thank you for their contribution and service to the degree that the Senate, the House of Parliament, and other phases of government have served this community. We pause to remember the recent hurricanes that threatened our shores without devastating loss of any life. Loss of possessions, perhaps, but replaceable possessions. God has been good to this island. God has been good to this island, particularly when many other places have reported of devastating conditions and the loss of many lives. Once again, God has been good to this island. Almighty God and Heavenly Father, who in thy providential wisdom and goodness has appointed the office of rulers in Senate and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just governance of mankind. In the words of King David, God hath made me ruler for the people's sake. We humbly request leaders would ever be reminded that they are there in position serving for the people's sake. We bless thee for the legislative session that has been done and we wait with great anticipation for the ensuing one. We beseech thee, so grant these thy servants in the performance of their trust in these islands, do aggressively, tenaciously call upon even nonpartisan persons as it relates to political parties to help in the rescuing of our island, to bring us back to community normalcy, to the extent that we would have the liberties and freedoms that represent a peaceful community. God, grant this according to your will. Grant them to discover that all retirees are not tired. Don't let their age be their cage, but to be their stage with such valued and volumes of experience in these troubled and precarious times. We request their assistance to be again serving alongside of a government dedicated for the betterment of this country, whatever it takes to make it happen. That we may move from a community of mourning to the glorious opportunity of witnessing a new morning of hope and tranquility. This we pray to be so in the convening of this new legislature, called to perform these important and expedient trusts in these Bermuda Isles. We beseech thee, O God, that blessings will so descend upon this community, upon our leaders, upon every phase and facet of community life, that, Lord, even in this season of what could largely be considered hopeless times, may we discover the best of times. This we pray today in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the government is making steady progress toward building a fairer and more equitable Bermuda. Seniors' pensions have been increased in successive years by the CPI, and payroll tax has been reduced for 86% of Bermuda's workers. Childcare assistance has been expanded so that now families making under $130,000 can get help paying for childcare. In the last 3 years, the government has converted to use 71 affordable housing units, with 118 more on the way. The government has introduced the first ever minimum wage in Bermuda. The results of the government's fairness initiatives are paying dividends in times of rising global prices. We are seeing increased numbers of Bermudians working as the number of jobs is increasing across multiple industries, with record numbers employed in international business. Overall, economic performance is strong and growing. Our economy remains resilient. The government's improving fiscal position has enabled the provision of relief to the residents of Bermuda. The high cost of healthcare has been mitigated by the third successive year of a freeze on government's portion of the standard health benefit, and the impact of global increases in the cost of fuel have been staved off by local government-led action. On the heels of the first expected budget surplus in 21 years, better than expected fiscal performance has allowed the government to reduce energy taxes by 60%, while deploying an unprecedented $25 million social and infrastructure package to broaden the reach of the island's economic success into social transformation. Bermuda has devised a corporate income tax regime that has cemented confidence in our pragmatic and collaborative approach to the invaluable partnership with international business. This approach is business-friendly and will make Bermuda's tax system fairer by allowing the government to reduce or eliminate taxes that increase the cost of living. An historic hotel redevelopment has been secured through direct government-led negotiations, which is already manifesting a positive economic impact. The Fairmont Southampton transaction represents Bermuda's largest hotel project and signals the renaissance of our tourism in defiance of considerable opposition to the redevelopment plans for this iconic emblem of the second pillar of this economy. This hotel project represents jobs and opportunities for Bermudians. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in the wake of a resounding mandate from the people of Bermuda, who 4 years ago braved the unknown to express their preference for representation in a general election that featured mask wearing and social distancing, the government has toiled every day in the last 4 years to discharge the covenant made between those who exercised that right and those who humbly accepted their challenge to serve them. The post-pandemic world of 2024 is one riven by wars, civil unrest, political angst, stubborn and systemic inequality, and an endless wave of misinformation transmitted at alarming speeds through all manner of media. In observing these global trends, it can call to mind the words of Nelson Mandela, who remarked, "After climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, though Bermuda has surmounted significant challenges, the government recognises that there are many more obstacles ahead. There is much more work to do to ensure that economic progress is felt by all Bermudians. In this legislative session, that work will renew the focus on the social transformation spurred by September's mid-year review and consolidate the fiscal successes that led to the historic expected budget surplus. The government's mid-year review and the allocation of additional resources to hire staff cement necessary programs and expand services to the people, prioritises the paths of economic growth, social renewal, and fairness. In his call for an economic Bill of Rights, Aaron Critchlow, co-founder of Bermuda is Love, profoundly said, "Bermuda is more than an idyllic paradise. It is more than its beaches, more than its financial sector. It is a place where humans are born, where families and individuals come together, where relationships flourish, and where lives lived are celebrated and treasured." Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, this year, Bermuda became the first of the overseas territories to achieve the extension of the UN Convention on the rights of persons with disabilities. This landmark position sets the stage for a local framework of greater inclusivity and protections for persons with disabilities in Bermuda. To complement the work done last year in the establishment of a formal register of disabled persons, the government will advance a Disabilities Act to ensure equal access to services, facilities, and employment. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, most persons receiving financial assistance are seniors and persons with disabilities, many of whom are in rest or nursing homes. To further enhance their dignity and bring added relief to those families supporting them, the Financial Assistance Regulations 2004 will be amended to add a $100 monthly personal allowance to cover the cost of personal care items, allowing this vulnerable population to meet basic hygiene needs. In keeping with the government's focus on bringing aid to the most vulnerable populations, the Ministry of Youth, Social Development and Seniors will lead a cross-ministry team struck to provide further intervention to identify high-risk families. This intensive family preservation team will address the need for basic life skills, ensuring the welfare of families and children with stable and suitable housing, nutritious food, and access to medical care. The multi-generational trauma endured by these families can and must be halted. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the road to achieving education reform has been a challenging one, but the people of Bermuda can see the results of the years of planning and development in the signature programs, now enhancing the educational experience of the island's residents. In addition to parish primary schools at the Elliott and Harrington Sound primary school sites, a third signature school for tourism and educational services will open at Sandy's Secondary Middle School. Additionally, the school transformation teams needed to develop the parish primary schools in Sandy's and St. George's will be onboarded. The Prospect Primary School will begin the transformation into a signature school for exceptionalities. This will allow for an expansion and improvement of those programs now offered at the Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy. Signature schools are a culmination of the reforms needed in public education. They give students more choice to pursue their passions, including technical training to help those who wish to work with their hands, practical skills fixing cars, learning to be an electrician or plumber, information technology, and other skilled trades that will offer them steady employment upon leaving school. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in 2022, Safe Lives UK was commissioned to undertake a complete system review of the response to domestic abuse in Bermuda. The review revealed a lack of perpetrator services available on the island and recommended embedding such services within the criminal justice process through direct referrals and reporting systems for meaningful engagement. Additionally, with the continued support of MARAC, the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Committee, comprising of the Centre Against Abuse, the Bermuda Police Service and the Ministry of Youth, Social Development and Seniors, a comprehensive, unified approach has been taken to address the scourge of domestic violence in our community. In partnership with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Judiciary, the Ministry of Justice will support the creation of a domestic violence court programme, ensuring devoted attention to the protection of victims with speedier protection orders and equally requiring accountability on the part of the perpetrators. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, there remains a risk of all that is done to strengthen communities being undone by antisocial behaviours and the impact of gangs. During this session, the government will introduce the Violence Reduction Strategy for Bermuda, its mission being to implement strategies that will reduce violence in Bermuda, particularly gang violence, in collaboration with various agencies with emphasis on prevention, intervention, and integration. The strategy will provide the guide for tackling unaddressed multi-generational trauma, coordinating the agencies charged with intervention, and managing the process by which women and men engaged in this lifestyle re-enter the mainstream of their communities. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, much is made of the fact that we are living longer. This fact once served as an indication of the marvel of modern medicine and improvements in access to healthcare. Today, living longer does not always mean living better. Chronic, non-communicable diseases afflict us at rates that now strain our healthcare system, increase costs within the system at every level, and diminish the quality of the long life which we should be poised to enjoy. To reduce the increased risk of heart disease, stroke, and other conditions like diabetes, legislation will be enacted to eliminate from our supply those foods containing industrially produced trans fats, recognizing the scientifically verified link between these substances and these conditions. As of July 2024, 58 countries around the world, covering 3.7 billion people, 9 of them in the Americas, have already enacted best practice policies to eliminate trans fats. In 2022, CARICOM Ministers of Trade and Health committed to enacting legislation by December 2024 to eliminate trans fats from the Caribbean food supply by December 2025. Building on the commitment made in the mid-year review, the government will continue to expand and enhance mental health initiatives through the Ministry of Health by building on existing programs, supporting existing third sector agencies, and focusing on youth mental health. A more inclusive and supportive environment will emerge for mental well-being in our community. As the government focuses on mental health for our young people, it is vital that we also tackle substance abuse. Utilising the funds awarded in the mid-year review, the Department of National Drug Control will reinstitute Bermuda Youth Counselling Services to address the gaps that exist in substance abuse treatment and counselling for adolescents. The path to universal healthcare has taken longer due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the government's mission to ensure that all Bermudians have access to quality and affordable healthcare is undimmed. Universal healthcare will reduce pressure on families and employers while keeping our population healthy, which in turn will reduce long-term costs. While the government finalises the design of the new healthcare packages, until Bermudians can enrol in the new Universal Healthcare Plan, the government will continue to expand access and improve the quality of HIP and future care. Therefore, during this session, the government will bring forward changes to legislation to expand access to preventative visits to doctors, provide improved coverage for prescription drugs, and reduce co-pays. The aim is simple: to reduce out-of-pocket expenses so that more persons can get annual checkups and can afford the medications prescribed by their physician. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly. On its founding in 2013, it was intended that the Bermuda Tourism Authority would be self-funding within 5 years. Now, in its second decade of existence, the time has come to perfect that vision and devise the means and method by which taxpayer funding for this independent entity is reduced and eventually eliminated. The journey will include fulsome public consultation on a commissioned report informed by stakeholder review and specific working groups. The Tourism Investment Act 2017 will be amended to expand the categories of development which attract incentives to include health and medical tourism and attractions in the adventure tourism category. The process for applications for tourism attractions will be streamlined to reduce the complexity of the application process. The government is committed to supporting and growing our tourism industry and ensuring that Bermudian entrepreneurs have easier access to concessions, which is vital to drive local investment in tourism attractions. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's workers have proved to be the solid foundation on which the growing economic recovery of the island is founded. Labour in all its various forms prevented economic collapse in the throes of the pandemic's darkest days, providing mostly uninterrupted services to us all. During this session, further strengthening of the minimum wage will be advanced, along with greater protections for workers in the enforcement of tribunal awards. In alignment with the position paper on retaining the local workforce and to encourage the retention of those Bermudians over 65 who wish to continue working, the government will bring legislation to eliminate the employer's proportion of payroll tax for those Bermudian employees so retained. The Department of Workforce Development will continue to be the principal vehicle through which Bermudians are equipped with the skills and opportunities to thrive in this growing economy. During this session, the department will expand apprenticeship opportunities in construction and skilled trades, expand solar energy training for electricians, accelerate hospitality training to meet the growing demands of the industry, and launch a new career development platform to close the workforce gap by developing students and job seekers and directly connecting them to employers. To assist long-serving employees faced with unexpected unemployment and loss of income, the Employment Act 2000 will be amended to increase maximum allowance severance pay from 26 weeks to 32 weeks for those from 26 weeks to 32 weeks for those employees in continuous employment for 13 years or more. This increase will be complemented by a legislative amendment to remove the requirement to pay payroll tax on redundancy pay. This will help provide stability and fairness for employees during a time of transition. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, The government believes that every Bermudian should have access to adequate and affordable housing. That reality, coupled with the need to grow our working population to support our ageing population, makes the expansion of Bermuda's housing inventory critical. As such, there will be a need for more housing to accommodate residents of Bermuda and a greater number of individuals living and working in Bermuda. Bermuda's demographic shifts are exacerbating the challenge of affordable housing in Bermuda, as there are not enough young Bermudians to replace the seniors who are retiring from the workforce. As these seniors retire, the additional labour needed to sustain Bermuda's economy often comes from guest workers. Given the fact that many of our seniors retire in Bermuda, the guest workers who may fill those jobs require accommodation. This reality is just one of the factors in Bermuda's housing challenges. Whether for rent or for purchase, access to affordable housing eludes too many Bermudians. Through recent pension reforms and the mortgage guarantee programme, the government has improved access to home ownership, benefiting dozens of Bermudians who have now purchased their first home. Existing homeowners have benefited from the elimination of taxes on mortgage transfers, with many Bermudians moving their mortgage to banks with more competitive rates, saving families thousands of dollars a year. The government has made available $50 million of guarantees for the construction of private residential development in the city of Hamilton. And over the last 3 years, the government has also committed $25 million additional dollars to support affordable housing, bringing a further 71 affordable units online, with 118 more expected to be delivered through the Bermuda Housing Corporation. These actions have helped, but given the demographic realities, more can and must be done. Due to Bermuda's limited land, the City of Hamilton will play a more significant role for the expansion of residential development. During this session, the government will publish the updated City of Hamilton Plan and the new St. David's Plan. These comprehensive documents will guide the area's future development, and for the City of Hamilton, relax the restrictions of building heights for residential development. The Department of Planning will also work with local construction stakeholders to promote modern building practices that can reduce the cost of residential construction to provide more housing more quickly for Bermuda's residents and seniors. The demographic shift that is expected to continue for the foreseeable future requires strategic action to ensure that more places are available for Bermudians to call their home. Therefore, during this legislative session, the Legislature will be invited to approve amendments to the Bermuda Housing Act that will give the government additional powers to tackle the challenge of derelict residential units to provide increased housing inventory for Bermudian families. For the last year, the government has been working on changes to the Landlord and Tenant Act to ensure fairness for landlords and tenants. Good tenants have had inadequate legal protection against bad landlords, and far too many good landlords have been victimised by bad tenants. By ensuring greater rights and protections for all, the government expects more landlords will be incentivised to put vacant units back on the local rental market. With the recent announcement of a change in the use of Bermudiana Beach, by December this year, this new proposed direction will see 94 studio, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom residential units of beachfront property added to fulfill a market demand for additional rental housing. These apartments will be a multi-family community with amenities, catering to young professionals and couples. To more directly assist those seeking housing, the government will provide support for families already on the BHC's waiting list to gain access to the units on this property through existing BHC housing initiatives. While the government expands housing options for residents, the plight of those who may be housing insecure must also be tackled. The government has completed the public consultation on a draft plan to end homelessness in Bermuda. During this legislative session, the Legislature will be invited to review and support the final plan, which will be a collaborative approach to tackle housing insecurity in Bermuda. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, earlier this year, the government undertook a red tape reduction consultation. Implementing the suggestions from the public has been made a clear directive to the public service, and the challenge has been met. The Ministry of Transport will eliminate the requirement to undergo a medical examination every 10 years as part of the driver licence renewal process until age 70, and will reduce the number of vehicle inspections required in the first 5 years for a new vehicle. Additionally, all remaining manual TCD processes will be digitised, providing an increasingly seamless experience for the public. The Ministry has also begun the required work to achieve reciprocity of foreign driving licences pursuant to the 1949 Geneva Convention on Road Traffic. To further harmonise the public service vehicle industry, a new, fairer payroll tax system for minibus owners will be introduced. Instituted through legislation, this new system will have a fixed payroll tax in 3 levels based on the seating capacity of the minibus. Additionally, the payroll tax for taxi owners will be reduced from $1,000 to $600 to create a more balanced structure within the industry. One aspect of red tape reduction is also the review and elimination of outdated laws. The Law Reform Commission under the Ministry of Justice has been staffed and will advance proposals for modernising or repealing existing acts. One such act the government has identified that is ripe for repeal is the Advertisements Regulations Act of 1911. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the labyrinth that is the Office of Project Management and Procurement's Code of Practice continues to serve as a disincentive to the empowerment of the very small and medium-sized businesses the government is determined to assist. As such, more streamlining of the code will be undertaken to ensure a simpler, faster, and fairer process. 14 months after a crippling cyber attack, the government has steadily improved cybersecurity and added to the robustness of the network. This has complemented the digital transformation project now underway to create the promised one-stop shop portal where the people can easily and securely access government services online. The Department of Statistics has commenced a modernisation exercise which will, over time, lead to the faster production of economic statistics. However, most of the information collected from employers is still completed via paper forms. The government, as part of its ongoing digital transformation initiative, will move the process for annual employment surveys, which are required under law for every employer in Bermuda. It is expected that this process will be trialled in 2025 to enable the 2026 survey to be online. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, Bermuda's connection to the ocean is intrinsic to our identity, our culture, and our economy. Recognizing the vital importance of protecting our marine environment, this government is committed to ensuring the long-term sustainable management of our fisheries and marine resources for future generations. In this vein, the government will strengthen marine enforcement through the implementation of the Marine Resources Enforcement Act. This plan will integrate ongoing efforts with key international partners, including the UK's Bermuda Blue Belt Ocean Shield Programme, the Waite Institute, and the US Coast Guard. These collaborations will bolster Bermuda's ability to safeguard our territorial sea and exclusive economic zone, ensuring a coordinated and modern approach to marine enforcement. Further, a raft of legislative improvements will be introduced to address critical management gaps identified during the development of the draft Blue Prosperity Plan in the Fisheries Act 1972, as well as through completion of the proposed Marine Development Act. These reforms will modernise Bermuda's marine management laws, promoting responsible fishing practices, protecting sensitive habitats, and facilitating the long-term sustainability of our marine ecosystem to ensure prosperity for Bermuda's commercial fishers. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, to provide for the more effective administration of the Legislature, a bill will be advanced to create a Parliamentary Management Commission, which shall be responsible for the administration and management of the House of Assembly and the Senate. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in a competitive global landscape, the recruitment and retention of talent within the Bermuda government necessitates a strategic focus on modernisation. Key efforts are nearly complete in updating the Public Service Commission Regulations 2001 to modernise the governance structure of the public service to align with contemporary best practices. These changes will give more flexibility to managers, allowing for quicker resolution of performance challenges. One of the most pressing issues identified is the disparity between government and market salaries. A recent review conducted by PwC has highlighted that the Bermuda government salaries in many instances are not competitive. This review recommended the adoption of a new grading model and a salary scale to better align public sector compensation with market standards. By addressing these disparities, the government aims to attract and retain top-tier talent essential for effective governance and public service delivery. Recognising the importance of leadership within the organisation, steps have been taken to implement comprehensive leadership training programmes at various levels. These programmes are designed to build capacity and foster a culture of continuous improvement and excellence within the public service. By investing in the development of current and future leaders, the government is ensuring that its workforce is well equipped to deliver better public services to the people of Bermuda. These efforts are vital to building a robust and dynamic public service capable of delivering high-quality services to the people of Bermuda that is also more accountable for its performance. As these initiatives are implemented, the Bermuda government remains committed to fostering an environment that values and supports its employees, ensuring a sustainable and effective public sector workforce for the future. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly. In the 66 years since the enactment of Bermuda's constitution order, its provisions have been tested and necessary amendments made for the better governance of these islands. In recent years, the independent regime by which appointments are made has been found wanting when the rare occasion arises for disciplinary oversight of appointees. This must be remedied. Accordingly, Government House and the Government of Bermuda will work together to develop a revised legal framework for accountability in senior constitutional positions. Public confidence in such high offices is of paramount importance, given the power those appointed have to significantly impact the lives of Bermuda's people. The government has implemented significant immigration reforms and has tabled proposals to ensure that Bermuda's population is sustainable into the future. However, there is one challenge that the government has not overcome, and that is the ruling by the court in 2016, which overturned the long-standing practice that the Department of Immigration was involved in the granting of belonger status in Bermuda. The result of this ruling allows non-Bermudian residents to apply directly to the United Kingdom government to become naturalised British Overseas Territories citizens. Under our constitution, BOTCs are deemed to belong, granting successful applicants unlimited rights to purchase property in Bermuda. The government believes that such immigration decisions should not reside in the United Kingdom, but with the locally elected government. Therefore, the government will begin consultation leading to a request to the United Kingdom for constitutional change so that the practice, which was observed in Bermuda for many years, be restored, ensuring that these critical immigration decisions involve Bermuda's elected government. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the government supports those independent branches of our constitutional tapestry who seek to modernise and provide fairer, better service to the people of Bermuda. A fair trial by jury is the bedrock of the criminal justice system, and to ensure the continuity of this right, amendments will be made to the Jurors Act 1971 to increase the pool of available jurors, including to provide for persons up to the age of 75 to serve on juries, to reduce the number of names required for any jury panel from which a jury is selected to hear a trial, and to increase the statutory allowance payable to those persons serving on juries. Regrettably, 18 years after the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 2006 was enacted, the fulsome nature of its intended protections for those who encounter the vast powers of the prosecutorial apparatus are not yet in force. Therefore, the remaining provisions of PACE, which deal with custody time limits and the detention of arrested persons, will be brought into force during this session. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, too little fairness exists within Bermuda's banking sector. Whether it be a lack of access to banking services or continually increasing fees or high interest rates, Bermudians are rightly enraged when they are asked to pay more while local banks proudly report increased profits. Following consultation by the Bermuda Monetary Authority, the Banks and Deposit Companies Act 1999 will be amended to require basic banking services to be provided for all persons to ensure that all residents have access to banking services. Regulations under that act to place limits on fees charged by banks will finally be advanced in this session. Fairness in financial services cannot just be limited to banking. Since the introduction of the National Pension Scheme Act in 1998, pension administrators have earned an estimated $500 million in fees. These fees, which have been found to be higher than in other jurisdictions, reduce the retirement savings for Bermuda's workers. During this session, the government will introduce regulations that will cap fees paid to pension plan administrators, resulting in substantial savings for Bermudians. These changes will mean that a Bermudian worker entering the workforce would have $75,000 more in their pension account at retirement. While the government advances fairness in financial services, we must also increase financial literacy in Bermuda. To ensure that the government's efforts in advancing financial literacy are appropriately targeted, the Ministry of Finance will launch a financial literacy survey, followed by a campaign of financial literacy initiatives delivered in partnership with pension administrators to improve financial literacy in Bermuda. To support the implementation of Bermuda's corporate income tax regime, legislation will be introduced to update the corporate income tax framework and address matters relating to the use of excess tax revenue. Based on the recommendations from the Tax Reform Commission and the International Tax Working Group, this legislation will codify how funds collected by the corporate income tax regime will be reserved for use. The projections state that within the next 10 years, the government should have enough in additional tax receipts to eliminate Bermuda's debt and establish a sovereign wealth fund to make strategic investments for Bermuda's future. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, a worrying consolidation in key industries has occurred in Bermuda. In critical sectors, consumers may be faced with the loss of genuine choice in service and of the competition that is essential to achieve quality delivery at appropriate costs. Recent local developments in food supply and financial services can have an ongoing adverse impact on prices, which this community can ill afford. Currently, the government is limited in its options outside of sectors under the regulatory authority to provide conditions for or to reject mergers that may concentrate the provision of essential goods or services that may reduce competition and increase prices. Given the real challenges with costs in Bermuda, residents rightly should expect the government should act in the public interest if it is deemed necessary to do so. Therefore, during this legislative session, the government will commence consultations on amendments to legislation to allow scrutiny of local mergers and acquisitions that concentrate significant power in essential sectors. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, in addition to the measures set out above, during this session, the Legislature will consider the following bills: Clean Air Bill, Consumer Protection Equitable Relief Amendment Bill, Education Authority Bill, Electronic Communications Cybercrime Amendment Bill, Insurance Amendment Bill, Landlord and Tenant and Rent Increases Domestic Premises Amendment Bills, Payroll Tax Amendment Bill Number 2 Bill, Public Access to Information Amendment Bill. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, the Trinidadian writer, historian and journalist C.L.R. James said, "When history is written as it ought to be written, it is the moderation and long patience of the masses at which men will wonder, not their ferocity." In Bermuda, that long patience of the masses is being tried by unfairness in too many sectors. Unfairness which inevitably spills over into the lives of the people to sometimes devastating effect. Unrestrained practices in healthcare services, banking, and now food supply, which have prioritized profits over people and which taunt the government to act, cannot go unanswered. The covenant of public service means facing down ingrained systems and setting an agenda of fairness and equity which governs for all and not for the few. This is the government's mantra for this session and beyond. Traditionally, at this point, the Governor is invited to add some words of her own. The principles of equality, fairness, good governance, and a separation of power underpins Bermuda's constitution. They are as relevant today as they were in 1968. That is why I have been diligent in protecting the separation of powers between key institutions such as the judiciary and the police service. But the fundamental principle of operational independence necessitates accountability. Rain, blow, or shine, I have been guided throughout my tenure by the principles of integrity and accountability in my support for good governance. I am proud of the progress we have made together, but know that that more must be done to ensure the continued trust and confidence of those that we serve. I remain inspired by the resilience, drive, and ingenuity of the communities that I've had the privilege to spend time with during my tenure. There is no doubting Bermuda's rich cultural diversity, enviable natural environment, and the abundance of passionate advocates and philanthropists. There is no doubting the intellectual capital, Bermuda's global reputation as a financial center, or how attractive it is as a base for international business. These are some of Bermuda's strengths, which can provide opportunities and prosperity for all. They are strengths to be nurtured and protected, but not to be complacent about. As I prepare to lay down my feathers for the last time and leave this unique territory that my family and I have made our home for the last 4 years, I am sure that I will continue to be a non-Bermudian flag bearer who remains invested in Bermuda's continued success. Madam President and members of the Senate, Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, I declare this session open, and may God guide you in your deliberations.
Her Excellency, the Governor, Rena Lalgie, has completed the reading of the throne speech. She is being escorted out by Major Duncan Simons of the Bermuda Regiment, accompanied by her husband, and the ADC stands slightly behind Her Excellency, the Governor. She begins to approach that beautiful carriage.
Landau, yeah, the Landau.
The Landau.
Well, it has been a full speech.
Very comprehensive
very
and robust. Yes.
Definitely a focus on the social issues and affordable housing and making housing available. And
also looking at what can be done to reduce violence. There's some new legislation that's coming forth, actually quite a bit of legislation that's coming forth. Domestic violence program. Her Excellency is now leaving Cabinet grounds
and
in the Landau and the motorcade in front and behind her.
We're going to ask that the invited guests allow the members of Parliament to retire to the chamber. And I did want to mention Mr. Clark Sumner, the new clerk to the legislature.
Yes.
We didn't get a chance to. And there is the Premier.
The Honorable David Burt. And his lovely wife,
Kristen
Kristen.
Burt. And we want to thank you all. We have enjoyed having you join us for this reading of the speech from the throne and the outlining, of course, the government's legislative agenda. And I saw the young ladies' names, the members of the Youth Parliament. I had their names earlier.
Yes.
I did want to say
Kalje Simons and
Kalaj
Simons, apologies, and Brianna King.
I do believe so.
Yes.
So we want to thank you for joining us. And as they retire, we will be, of course, hearing more about government's legislative agenda and about the plans and the new legislation that will be taking place as well. There's so many things in there we could talk about.
But it's a very comprehensive agenda.
Yes, it
is.
is.
There's the Tourism Investment Act that's going to be amended. There's the government mental health initiatives that are going to be expanded upon, financial regulations, Disabilities Act to be advanced, education reform, and what will be happening with the signature schools, and that will be advanced as well.
Yeah.
And there's an amendment to the Jurors Act.
Yes. Yes, I saw that. I saw that. The age expanded as well for that you could sit on a jury. So we thank you. We thank you from our CITV team and all that were responsible for today. Thank you so much for joining us. As we said, it is on social media, so you'll be able to go back. If you missed something, you can go back and look at it. Also, the throne speech is now available online at gov.bm. You can go there and take your time and read the entire throne speech. We thank, of course, for her service. This is the last
Convening
speech
that
of
she will officiate.
Governor
Yes.
Rena Langley. And of course, we do Lalgie. Sorry.
Lalgie, yes, Governor.
So
Lalgie.
thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you all a Bermuda beautiful day.
It's a lovely
Thank
day.
you.
All the best, and thank you.